recognizes the ranking member for opening statement. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement. I yield back.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Distinguished gentlelady from California, Mary Bono. Gentlelady is recognized.
Chair now recognizes
the lady from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to introduce Congresswoman Mary Bono, former U.S. Representative for California's Inland Empire and Desert Region from 1998 to 2013.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Hello and welcome to Sagely Speaking. I'm your host, Mary Bono, and I couldn't be more delighted to have a guest on than this particular guest. He's a longtime friend, and I say that with emphasis because I truly consider him a great friend, a supporter, a mentor, so many things. I'm honored to have his friendship. But Hal Rogers, congressman serving Kentucky's 5th Congressional District since 1981. Hal has been elected to 22 consecutive terms representing the people of southern and eastern Kentucky. Now, his bio is fantastic. He's what we call a cardinal, which is one of the most powerful members of Congress. And he's quite busy. So, Hal, thank you so much for being here today. I cannot wait to get into our conversation.
Well, Mary, I'm delighted to be on your program, but especially just to see you and talk with you. We've been friends for a long, long time.
You know, it's interesting about our friendship. If people understood the Congress, especially the House of Representatives, there are 435 of us, or them. I would consider them since I'm no longer there. But that's a lot of people to get to know. And generally, you get to know your colleagues by committee assignment or the region you serve, the state you serve, a whole lot of reasons. Now, Hal, you were always pleasant to me, and we said hello, and I knew you were very powerful, and I was just a freshman member. But it took a little bit of time. I knew the work you're up to on the opioid epidemic, but it really didn't seem to be affecting my district until it was. And then I remember I sat next to you on the floor of the House of Representatives in the chamber, and I said, we need to work together because nobody else is paying attention to this, and you've been leading on this for a number of years. And it seems to me, my memory is from that moment on, we were thick as thieves, as you might say, although it's bad to say that about members of Congress. But I just want to thank you. And suddenly California and Kentucky became united on our efforts to address the opioid epidemic. At that time, it was prescription pills. So what'd you think about this little junior member from California sitting next to you going, hey, we've got to talk?
Well, I was delighted to learn of your devotion to this cause. My district in the hills of East Kentucky was ground zero for the explosion of opioid overdoses, mainly OxyContin, 25 years ago. And that got me involved in the problem. So I started an organization we called UNITE, which stands for Unlawful Narcotics Investigations, Treatment, Education. And we've got chapters in every community, every county, with thousands of people involved. And that's where you and I sort of came into our friendship, because I know of your loss, and I know of your devotion to this cause. Well, Mary, we've got a little bit of good news. The latest information is we've had a slight decrease in the number of opioid overdose deaths. It's saying a lot that we've had a reduction. It's not enough, but it's a start.
It is a start. Whenever you see numbers ticking down or trending the right way, you want to reinforce what you're doing right and do a lot more of it. And I would say it's been a long time coming, but there are a lot of nonprofits, a lot of people, a lot of parents out there in the country who are devoted to changing this. They know that this is preventable. But if I talk about Operation Unite, it is a role model, sort of the gold standard on what communities ought to do. But you also created the RX Summit, and I believe the first one was, 2012, 2011? And it's been going strong ever since. And I'm looking forward to attending this year's summit, which will be in April in Nashville, Tennessee. And I know I remember the first one you had maybe hundreds of people there, and now you have thousands of people there. And I look forward to being there.
The first one, we had around 700 people. Now we're over 4,000 per year at the annual summit, including 4 presidents. All but the current one has been to our summit. And of course, you've been a major part of it with your testimony and your living example for so many people. I thank you for your devotion to this cause.
I thank you and for your leadership for sure. But the RX Summit is something, if you care about policy in the drug space, it's really the place to be, I would say. And congratulations on having the presidents attend. Obviously, that gives testament to the importance of this event. And it has changed so much. Early on, you and I were dragging people into this cause, fighting them tooth and nail. You can, whether it was our colleagues, whether it was industry, whatever, people were fighting us. And now there are thousands of people there joining and doing everything that they can do and taking it back to their communities to make a difference, not only save lives from overdose deaths, but also change lives and hopefully prevent people from starting down the path of drug abuse in the first place. But how, sorry.
That summit now is recognized as the preeminent problem-solving summit that you've been a part of. And it includes people like lawyers, judges, nurses, doctors, whatever. If you have some connection to the problem, overdose deaths, you're represented at this summit for 4 days under one roof. We bring all of the people involved in the problem for them to share with each other their successes back home.
It's phenomenal. Again, I encourage people to go. But how has the sentiment in Congress changed over the years? When I left, we didn't yet have major legislation that passed, like the Support Act, other legislation, bipartisan legislation addressing the problem. When I left at the start of 2013, we were still trying to raise the awareness and press the issue. And it seems to me it wasn't until every single member of Congress was learning of overdose deaths in their districts, that's when the tide turned. What's the sentiment now when you talk to folks?
Well, it's what you and I know it is. It's heavy interest in the problem. It's now recognized as a disease rather than something else. So the attitude of the country has changed toward the problem. With fentanyl now taking 70,000 or so deaths per year, that has renewed interest in the problem. And rightly so, because fentanyl is deadly. And I think most members of Congress, thanks to your leadership and others, now recognize the problem for what it is, a major health hazard for every person in the country.
That's so true. And it's amazing because I think when we started our work on the prescription drug epidemic that was hitting your district so hard and Appalachia so hard and Florida and the Eastern Seaboard and then California. But as we were fighting that fight, I never thought we would get to where we are today. Now, some people will criticize us and say, well, it's your fault because you clamped down on the prescription drug, industry or physicians being able to prescribe. And so therefore the country moved and the bad guys moved into illicit fentanyl. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, it's a major part of the economy of the country, medicine, drugs, opioids, and the like. And we have an obligation, you and I and others, we have an obligation to try to prevent overdose deaths. Not to take away medicine from legitimate users, but the illegitimate users especially. We have an obligation to try to prevent deaths from taking place.
You're right, and I believe we can do that. I believe that there's a sweet spot in all policy where we can make sure legitimate pain patients can get the medications that they are prescribed by their physician, but that we can keep those out of the hands of children or off the streets in the black market. So I think that criticism to me is short-sighted in that we should be able to do all of this and do it well. And, fentanyl, and you look at the traffickers and narco-traffickers who are bringing it in from south of the border, it is a huge problem beyond the prescription pad. It is a national security problem. Can you talk a little bit about fentanyl, how it's getting here in our porous border, and what we need to do to combat these transnational criminal organizations?
Well, it comes from China, or the precursors come from China to Mexico, and then across the open border into the U.S., into Arizona, California, Texas, and so on. We are failing as a nation to hold China responsible for the death that they're causing in our country. We are, and the open border with Mexico is absolutely a crime in and of itself, letting in millions of unchecked people, bringing drugs with them, and allowing the cartels in Mexico to rule the U.S. market. So I hold our present government liable for some bad things.
Well, let's talk China. What are the options that Congress is discussing, how we might address China specifically? And then, of course, we can get to the border. But what do we need to do with China to stop the manufacturing and the exportation from their country into ours of this lethal poison?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. The administration, by allowing illegal aliens to flood across our border with Mexico, that creates such a market for illegitimate drugs like fentanyl from China that allows them to have free sway in the enormous U.S. market, illegal market, for fentanyl. So I hold this administration responsible because of their breach of the border, allowing the pushers and the cartels to have sway across the U.S., which they do now have.
Well, China is a whole huge issue. I think that they are one of our adversaries and biggest threats. And so this is one of the issues, but I don't even know that they're going to come to the negotiating table or stop. And it's not just illicit drugs. They're doing the same thing with their illegal vape products that they're importing into the country, and they're getting kids as young as 10 hooked on these vape products that come in lovely flavors. But Mexico, the border, even the leadership of Mexico, this problem is so obvious and glaring that is a risk to our country, and day by day it gets worse. It's not a matter of funding. You're a cardinal. You know these levels of funding that are going out. It's just political will? What is the problem?
Well, the passage of a responsible immigration reform bill is impossible because of the narrow margins in the House and Senate in general. And so that makes it doubly difficult to get anything passed that is non-controversial.
It's pretty unbelievable because this is a very serious problem that transcends just the drug problem. Well, when I talk about funding and funding levels, I've heard from a lot of scholars who said that's not the problem coming out of the Congress, is the funding levels. They feel pretty comfortable right now with where we are. Obviously, that's going to change. But between congressional support and then opioid settlement, litigation settlement money, do you think there is enough money out in the economy to handle and address the problem of opioid use disorder and overdose deaths? Do we need more? Are we not coordinating it well? What's happening with all of the money that's trying to address the problem?
It's not the problem that people say it is. They have plenty of money. What we don't have is determination by the governmental agencies to deal with Mexico and China in a responsible way. And I don't see that changing with the current administration. Now, we've got a great soldier in the head of DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration.
That's good to hear.
She is tough, fair, but tough. She has gone into Mexico and arrested very key people in the drug trafficking business, and is being slowed down really by the White House. So she's a good soldier and is fighting the good fight.
I would say that about the DEA agents across the board, from top to bottom. It seems to me the disconnect between DEA administrator and either Department of Justice or the White House, wherever it is, there is a big snafu in between those two. And again, I want to just thank the DEA agents in the world, current and former, for what they do. It's a tough job. It's oftentimes a job we don't hear about what's
Right.
going on or pay attention to because it's happening elsewhere, somewhere else, not just south of the border, but now worldwide. So great opportunity to thank the DEA for their efforts. We'll continue with our interview in a moment, but first I'd like to thank my sponsors. Lucy Pet Foods is the leader in gut health. Their formulas for life feature prebiotic, balanced fiber that nourishes your dog and cat's total health. Every purchase helps support the Lucy Pet Foundation, a 501c3 charity helping animals. Save 15% off your first order and use the promo code SAGELYSPEAKING, all one word, and you will get free shipping at lucypetfoods.com. If you're committed to tackling the opioid and addiction crises, then you need to be at the 2025 RX Summit. Use code SAGELY, that's SAGELY, for an extra $100 off. Join top experts and professionals as we share strategies for prevention, deflection, treatment, and recovery. Don't miss this chance to be part of the change. Head over to rx-summit.com to register now. That's rx-summit.com for an additional $100 off. And a thank you to Mothers Against Prescription Drug Abuse, driving solutions to prevent drug abuse and overdose deaths by focusing on prevention through education and awareness. Go to mapta.net for more information. And now, back to our interview. You talk about education as one of your pillars. It seems to me that, and I would say this back when you and I were sitting on the, in the chamber, that part of the problem is people don't think this is going to affect them. It's, again, it's happening over their problem. And they think that until it does, and until it disrupts their family life or destroys their family life. And that's been a hurdle I've felt for over a decade on getting people to wake up, to pay attention. If you're sending your child off to their freshman year at college, you need to recognize and talk to your child about these threats. Can you talk about your work in the education part of the Unite platform?
Well, it's at the same time a national matter as well as a local matter, and that is creating knowledge of this problem. It's easy for us all to turn our head and not, when we see something like this taking place, it's easy to play ignorant and to not want to talk about such a unfunny issue. When we've got 70,000 people a year dying from fentanyl overdose, you would think that the nation would be up in arms, as they should be. And yet, we sort of ignore the problem because it's not very popular to talk about. drug overdose. But I think attitudes are changing and have changed dramatically, frankly, so far about the issue of overdose deaths. We now recognize that this is a disease that has to be dealt with as a disease, and that helps us cross over the issue of not wanting to talk about an unpopular matter.
Yeah, we've done a lot as a country, I think group of advocates, Congress, on reducing the stigma surrounded by any use disorder, alcohol, opioids, and recognizing it is a disease and to get into treatment, and people should help you get into treatment without stigmatizing you and telling you it's a moral failing. But what's terrifying now is that these kids aren't even addicted to anything yet. They just take a pill that they think is a legitimate pill that they can get off of social media, and they're dead from one pill. So the threat has changed entirely from, and trying to get people into treatment into now don't even mess around with it. There's no room for error anymore. One mistake and you or your friend is not going to see the end of the day. And it's terrifying.
Well, I think part of the problem is we're a pill nation. There's a pill for everything. And on TV, on the internet, radio, and the like, and the printed press, we promote the sale of all sorts of drugs, pills, legitimate, for legitimate ailments. But kids see the pills that a friend might give them, and they think nothing of taking that pill. That's what you do in this country. You take a pill for whatever. So we have popularized the use of pills. Now the ones that are reduced into the killer state that we're in, we've got a problem.
We do, and it rises to the level of the federal government without question. And we can't take this any longer as it's a matter of let's educate our way out of it or let's have a new DARE program. I mean, parents are begging for help here. They're absolutely begging for help. And clearly you've identified this administration and I mentioned the Department of Justice. Again, they've done some great work, but at the same time, so many people are dying. If we lost, I used to say this, Hal, at the RX Summit with you, if we lost 10 dolphins a day on the beach every day, the country would be in an uproar.
Yeah.
And there's no uproar except for grieving parents. And that's where your leadership has been commendable because, another thing I learned when I was in Congress is a lot of times people wait for data and for facts, and that's great, especially to inform us on public policy. But there's a time in your congressional district you are seeing something very bad happening. And I used to talk to Dr. Volkov at NIDA and ask for help. I think you and I were in some of those meetings together. And rather than studying the next 10,000 people who die, can we study the last 10,000 people who die? And that's something it seemed took us a long time. We were waiting for data. But we were seeing it in real time in our districts. What took the Congress so long to wake up to this problem?
That's a good question. I think we've sort of covered it with our conversation so far. The stigma of drug overdose use over the years has kept public attention away from the problem. And I think the enormous number of deaths, 70,000 a year just for fentanyl, I think that brought about the attention that it deserves. But we still got a problem. The stigma still is there to a degree.
Oh, absolutely. And that's another conversation. But also, what about the pushback? we both received it, but the specific pushback, you were fighting drug companies before it was cool to fight drug companies. You were actually raising the flag here and talking to drug companies and trade associations and folks who either knew it was happening but refused to admit it, or were clueless and just thought that they had no role in it. So you were an adversary to some very powerful interests early on.
Yes, we had the heads of Purdue Pharma, which produced OxyContin, early on and chewed them out pretty good. But got the ball rolling, I think, on drawing attention to the severity of this problem and getting to the roots of people that are involved in producing the pills that they were overdosing on. Yes, I have followed the pursuit of the makers of overdose-prone pills like OxyContin. We have followed those companies, Purdue Pharma especially, down through the years. And the courts have brought about tremendous penalties on them. But I hope they're not through with it yet.
You and me both. But I just want to point out that you took on a constituency that was difficult to take on. You were very brave and courageous to stand up and defy people who ordinarily they are a very powerful lobby in Washington, and you stood up. And that took a kind of courage, political courage, personal courage. It took a kind of integrity that I hope people know about you, because it is hard. And by the way, when you do it, you are, you personify walk softly but carry a big stick. You really do. It was one thing when Hal Rogers would walk in the room and he wants to call these executives to the mat, and you would be so soft-spoken and they'd be trembling. Okay, I'm making that up in a sense. It's anecdotal. But I would, and it was a thing of beauty to watch, especially as a junior member, and just to watch Hal walk in the room, and everything changed. You never raised your voice, you never expressed anger, you just said how it was going to be and what you wanted to see happen, and it was a thing of beauty to watch. But the other thing you championed, and it took a long time to even get the level raised in the Congress to this even existed, prescription drug monitoring programs. And this goes back to, we can do this and we can do it right with systems in place. PDMP, how is that fight going on in Congress, or has that been settled?
Well, I hope it's been settled. Every state now has a prescription drug monitoring agency. Missouri was the last. And they're now on board. But that program did a lot to prevent overdoses from pills where a person would double fill a prescription. He would have the prescription, say, in Kentucky, and then he would go to Tennessee or Illinois or whatever and fill that prescription once and maybe even more than that. So these agencies now, by computer, prevents a person from double filling a single prescription. And that was a major step.
Well, I congratulate you on that. You were on that for years and pushing, and just thank you for that. And, when you think about the nature of these very powerful pills, illicit, in this case, legal prescription medications, but they are very addictive for the human animal, I call us. And the lengths people have to go to when they have become addicted, whether it's doctor shopping, crossing border lines, and then to support their habit, they've got to get the double prescription and sell it. And this isn't a moral failing. Parts of it are moral failings, absolutely, but this is the problem with these powerful drugs, is that this is, once somebody is truly addicted, that this is the path, that they take over and hijack the human brain and reason and thinking. And that's why this work was so, so important. Just too bad people didn't see it a decade before we did.
Yeah, and it's a different kind of problem, plain opioid versus fentanyl. Opioids, of course, are legitimately prescribed for pain and what have you. But OxyContin, fentanyl, is an illegitimate imported drug that comes to us by hook or crook. So it's a different type of problem from opioid overdose deaths.
It is absolutely a different type of problem. But Hal, I look forward to seeing you in Nashville in April for the RX Summit. And I cannot thank you enough for all you've done, for your leadership that you've provided the country on this issue and so much more. Defense, you name it. And Hal Rogers is absolutely just a powerhouse and a legend in the Congress. So I want to just say thank you again. And whatever you do, we will follow and support and probably copy and try to implement where we can. But, that's the highest form of flattery, right, is imitation. But is there anything else that I've forgotten to ask you you'd like to say?
No, I thank you for the conversation. Mary, thank you so much for what you have done and are doing in pursuit of the solution to this problem. You've been there every step of the way, as far as I'm concerned. You're 15 years in Congress, 14 or 15 years in Congress, were a bright spot for all of us because your devotion to your causes was admirable to watch. So thank you for your help to me over the years, and I look forward to many more.
Well, thank you very much, Hal. Again, I want to thank you for listening to Sagely Speaking today. If you want to find out more about Hal Rogers, I encourage you to go to his website. And if you'd like to reach out to us with any comments, thoughts, or like Hal did, compliments, we'll take those too. You can reach out to us at hello@sagelyspeaking.com. Special thank you to our sponsors, and a reminder that we look forward to seeing you all at the RX Summit in 2025. And until next time, be well.